Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Forest Policy ETalks, the Forestry Development Center webinar series of 20. How is everyone today? I hope all of us are well, especially at this time of pandemic. We really appreciate your presence and active participation and interest whenever we hold webinars and post webinar announcement in our Facebook page. Actually, we have about 1,000 registrants for this webinar. 1,200 to be exact, I think. And right now, we already have 520 participants in the Zoom room, including the panelists here. And some may be participating via live stream on our Facebook page, UPLB Forestry Development Center. So, ayan po, hindi naman po kasi lahat ay makakain or makakapasok po dito sa ating Zoom webinar. So we encourage you to go, for some of the participants or the registrants, to go to our FB Live. FB Live Facebook page, which is UPLB Forestry Development Center. And if you have friends or colleagues or organizations that might also be interested in this event, you may share our live stream right now to them so that they can also participate in this discussion. Ayan, so as what we have watched earlier from the videos, the FDC have been conducting this ETalks or webinars since the start of quarantine last year. We have actually lifted our policy seminars and technical fora to the cloud via webinars. Of course, we would like to thank our partner UPLB Information Technology Center for powering this webinar. Again, I know that everyone is excited to hear from our three speakers and learn more about how to communicate policy advocacies in our respective fields. So hindi lamang po sa forest sector, but I know that most of us are coming from the forestry sector po, no? So in various fields also. So to officially start the program, so while waiting for the video of our invocation and the playing of the national anthem, may we remind you below on your screen interface.
For all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. May you extend your divine wisdom to our speaker so that he would be able to impart effectively information from this activity and spread what we've learned in the spirit of your love and generosity. May we realize that this activity should glorify your name. Amen.
Here to deliver the welcome remarks, the newly appointed Dean of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, Dean Dr. Marlo Mendoza.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Forest Policy ETalks webinar series organized by the Forestry Development Center. Today's forum is about Communicating Policy Advocacies. We are fortunate to have speakers who are experts and well-placed to discuss this topic. I would like to give a warm welcome to our speakers, namely Forester Ray Thomas Kabigting from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Mr. Raul Terso from the Committee on Natural Resources of the House of Representatives, and Mr. Paoloregel Samonte from the Department of Health. They will be sharing with us the policy advocacies and programs of their respective institutions, their approaches and strategies to effectively communicate or promote this to the public and the policymakers. The call to strengthen, develop, and update policies in the country have become more apparent than ever. In times of crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, more frequent typhoons, drought, flooding due to climate change, which impacts on livelihoods, food and nutrition, stability and productivity of ecosystems. The public should be able to rely on structures such as policies to address the probable effects and thus respond to the public's needs and ensure a stable social and economic environment amidst this crisis. But is a collaboration across sectors and disciplines such as education, environment, and natural resources, health, economy, among others. On the part of the academe and research community, we are always willing to strengthen our linkages with policy and decision makers. In many instances, the academe has provided expert opinions in the fields of agriculture, forestry, environment, among other fields. Research plays a vital role in guiding and influencing policy decisions by providing science-based evidences. Our challenge, therefore, is how to communicate this in a way that would guide the choices and thinking of policymakers and the public. I hope this forum will give us insights on how we can further strengthen our relationships with policymakers, influence policy decisions, and be effective policy advocates. Thank you and good day.
Ayan, thank you very much, Dean Mendoza, for the warm welcome and, of course, the support of the college to the Forest Policy ETalks. So let me share the overview of the program for this webinar. Ayan. We will share the overview of the program of this webinar para speakers. Next, we will have time for open forum, the awarding of certificates, and lastly, the response and closing remarks from the Director of FDC. Hopefully, we can end the webinar at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's the earliest that we can finish this webinar. We will be sharing an eventful afternoon, as you can see in the program. I hope that you are all seated comfortably in your own space, maybe practicing physical distancing if we are watching with our office mates at work. So before we proceed to the meat of the program, to the presentations, let me remind you of some house rules. So for the open forum part, if we have time to entertain live questions, you may click the raise hand button and ask your questions to the speaker live. Make sure to use also the Q&A tab for Zoom participants and the comment section for the Facebook Live participants. Please indicate your organization and the name of the speaker you will direct your questions to when typing in your questions. Ayan, so this is to inform everyone that the whole webinar is recorded for documentation purposes and the video is live on Facebook. So you may actually go back to the video recording. So you may kindly give us your assessment. E-certificates will be distributed shortly after, so only those who will submit an evaluation will be able to House of Representatives. He obtained his BS degree in Human Ecology from UPLB. Meanwhile, he obtained his master's degree in public management from the Development Academy of the Philippines. As committee secretary, he has seen the development and eventual passage of important legislation, most recent of which was RA number 11038, or the Expanded National Protected Area System Act of 2018. As committee secretary, it is part of his task to serve as conduit between the House members and the general public, as he leads the committee in gathering and sifting through inputs from stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome the first presenter, Committee Secretary Raul Terso.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Michiko. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it feels great to be back in UPLB, although virtually. The last time I went to UPLB, I think, was in 2016. I miss my contemporaries, my brads in the College of Forestry. Para malaman yung age ko, kasabayan ko noon, sila Delphine Ganapin, Obet Oliva, Mon Pahe, sila Rodelasco, College of Forestry. Dami. Anyway, to start with, let me share you my presentation. Wait. Sandali lang po Akin. Paano to share? Share screen. Okay, nasa na yung presentation PowerPoint here. Share. Okay. Okay, tapos yan. Okay. So, I'm sorry. Ganyan talaga pag mga bata. So, this is my presentation in relation to the theme community participation of the public in Congress, focusing on the advocates and advocacy groups. So, wait. Wow. Excuse me. Akin. Continue for next. Okay. Okay, this is the general outline of my presentation. Number one is the basis for public participation in policy making, meaning in this particular case, the House of Representatives, as well as Congress in general. The overview of the Philippine legislative process, the advocacy initiatives in the legislative process, committee deliberations, very important. This is very important. And I am giving you some tips and pointers for effective advocacy in legislation. So ito yung mga over the years, I have learned a lot of lessons regarding the approaches of the advocates. Okay. So, what is the basis for public participation? It's in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which recognizes the importance of public participation in promoting welfare of the nation. Also mandated the establishment of adequate consultation mechanisms. In the legislative process, the focus of the participation is on promoting input coming from the participation of the public. Okay, just an overview, medyo magulo lang, to simplify the process of legislation. So, meron tayong, as we know, may Senate and House, pero basically, same yung kanilang procedure. So, it starts with the filing of a bill by this senator or the congressman. And then, meron pinoprocess yan para itong parang tayo nasa, anyway, pinoprocess yan and then it will go. And after which, the bill will be assigned to a specific committee depending on the nature of the bill. So sa akin po, Committee on Natural Resources, ang mga bills na napupunta are and land administration, land management. Yan po. Including water, pati water po sa akin. Dito po lahat, nandito yung mga members ng committees, ng mga congressmen. And invited here are the resource persons from government agencies, from civil society, from the private sector, business sector, academe, the local government units, lahat po talagang ini-invite dito at sinasangguni para mapag-usapan ng gusto yung pros and cons ng bill. Okay? Dito po, mamaya po discuss natin kasi ito po yung meat ng public participation and yung meat ng mga advocacies. Dito po sila naririnig. Okay? So after lahat na po ng mga congressman at senators nasa plenary to discuss the bill, to approve or disapprove. Okay? Then kung na-approve yan, punta na third reading, final na sa House. So after the third reading, it will be transmitted to the Senate. Okay? If ever merong counterpart ang Senate, the bill, they will also deliberate on this. And based on their deliberation, kung ano yung ma-come up nilang measure or bill, if there are disagreeing provisions from both houses, magkakaroon po ng tinatawag na bicameral conference committee. Ito na po yung representatives from delegates from the House, delegates from the Senate, magko-convene po to discuss the differences of their bills. Okay? So dito po nangyayari yung mga haggling, yung mga compromise, dito po, mga last minute insertions, mga ganyan. After that, ira-ratify ng both houses, ibabalik for the president's action. The president may, upon the civil society, will decide whether to approve or veto the bill. If he approves, president signs the bill into law. Or if the president will not sign the bill after 30 working days, it's deemed approved. Okay. So yan po, ganun po. Mamaya di-discuss natin po yung takbo po ng yung participation. Ano po yung mga initiatives ng advocacy group? Preliminary stage po, issues, problems, or solutions can reach the attention of the House members and some senators. Dito po, importante yung mga mangyari. Gusto nilang bill. Dito po, naghahanap po sila ng proponent to sponsor or champion their proposed legislation. Importante po yung stage na to. Kasi hindi lang po basta-basta kukuha tayo ng mag-introduce or mag-author ng bill natin. Importante po na malaman natin kung ano discuss natin yan. Bakit importante yan. Hindi lang po porket sikat siya or ano. Kasi po, malaking bagay ang magiging role niya dyan. Okay? So, sa committee level, yun na nga. Dito po ang meat ng buong discussion ng bill. Sabi nga, committees at work is Congress in action. Dito po talaga lahat ng mga balitaktakan ginagawa. Dito po nagtatagal ang mga bills dahil dito nyo makikita yung polarities ng mga yung differences ng mga position of the different sectors. So, importante po marinig yan lahat sila. Kahit na dyan po madalas nag-aaway-away, mga ganyan, dami. And meron po mga ibang bills naman na magkaibang, although they speak of the same subject matter, magkaiba po yung laman nila. So, dyan po, makikita mo na yung congressman or senators, talagang meron silang mga opposing views. Diyan po nagtatagal until such time na mag-agree sila for consensus with after consulting the different sectors. Ito po ang role ng mga advocates. Nandiyan po sila sa level na to. And then, they decide whether to approve or will not take action on the bill. Okay. So, importante po dito, meron tayong open channels with the Secretariat, yung mga advocacy groups. Importante po yan. Kasi anytime, pag tinatawag sila, ganyan, nandun sila to give support to the authors of the bill. The technical working group, ito po. Nung araw po, ang ginagawa ng mga committees is they create the protected areas. May subcommittee ako on mining, ganyan. Pero hindi na po namin ginagamit ito except for large committees in Congress like appropriations. May subcommittee sila on say Department of Environment, Natural Resources. May subcommittee sila on different agencies. ASA. It's simpler, no, less formal and structured ng committee meeting. Ito po ang we employ this strategy, yung technical working group meetings. And many of you, sila Mr. Ray Kabigting, sa Forestry Ray Kabigting, madalas po namin bisita dyan sa technical working group. Masyadong, lalo na kung masalimuot po yung mga discussion like sa mining, talaga ang hirap po. Kailangan technical working group mo yan. And doon po may more in-depth discussion than the regular committee meetings na medyo limited ang time ng mga congressman at hindi nabibigyan ng pagkakataon yung mga technical working group na yan. Yan po ng may mga advocates, mga advocacy groups. Madalas po natin makita dyan. Okay, objectives. Alam natin yan, yung mga committee deliberations and TWG. Dyan po kasi, no? So, I will lampasan ko na po yan. Okay. Sabi ko nga po, in my more than 30 years experience in the committee, in Congress, in the House of Representatives, marami na po akong mga naobserbahan and napansin na mga at natutunan na para sa mga advocates, sa participation ng mga advocates. Okay? So I will start with tips and pointers, no? Based on my own experience. Okay, number 1 tip. Kaya kailangan very knowledgeable siya, pag-aaralan niya yung pinopropose yung legislation. No? Siya rin po ang magde-defend sa plenary. Pagdating sa plenary for second reading, siya rin po. Dapat pong alam na alam niya yung sinasabi niya. And ang role po ng mga advocates ay palagi po silang nasa likod ng legislator. Say, in the committee hearings, ganyan, in the technical working groups, and during the plenary second reading na naka-backstop po ang mga advocates dyan. In case na may itanong ang mga legislators, so siya po mag-explain ng bill, siya magde-defend. So importante po na meron siyang comprehensive knowledge, meron po siyang on-hand na facts and figures, historical data, and who will provide that? The advocates. Okay? Whether it's a government agency, it's an NGO, a civil society, private sector. Okay? Marami pong tinatanong dyan sa bill, sa ganyan. Tatanungin yung anong basis mo for appropriations, budget, bakit ka, tapos sasabihin lang, ay sir, we will give you the computation after next week. Hindi po gano'n, dapat ready po kayo. Anong basis nyo nang hinihingi nyo budget for appropriations? O minsan may tinatanong anong structure, meron mga bills na calling for restructuring or reorganization of offices. O tatanungin yan. Okay, what's ano po ang structure pattern ninyo? Ano ang yung mga ganyan, staffing pattern, magkano po ang kailangan, ganyan. Kailangan po ready palagi yan. Minsan may mga bills na may mga conflicts, impacts on other programs and other laws. Dapat alam sagutin yan ng mga proponents. Okay? Maraming bills po na contentious bills, no? Like dito tayo sa natural resources, pagdating sa mining, very contentious yan. Forestry, land use na hanggang ngayon hindi pa matapos-tapos, kasabay ng sustainable forest yan. Meron tayong mga bago ngayon, West Philippine Sea. Meron po sa amin dyan na declaring the West Philippine Sea as a protected area or reclassifying ganyan, West Philippine Sea into AND. Mga ganyan po, napaka salimuot po yung mga subject matter na yan. Okay? Now let's go. Nandun pala. Okay. Yung support groups po, tip number 3. Tip number 2 natin is yung be ready with facts and figures. Okay, okay na po yan. Tip number 3, meron tayo, yung importante po yung support groups natin. No, meron pong may mga other groups may be doing the same advocacy. So dapat po magkaisa tayo. Sino pa po yung mga ibang support groups? Pwede po natin napakalaking bagay po ng local government units. No? Yung support ng mga local government units. Napakalaking bagay po. Lalo na kung malaking bill like sustainable forest management, napakalaking bill. Talagang maraming stakeholders po ang kailangan masangguni at hinga ng suporta dito. And mamaya po, discuss ko kung paano ginagawa. Kung bakit nung araw tumagal yan, kung bakit ngayon, meron po. Discuss ko yan. Support groups. Ito po. Constant monitoring. Importante po yan, ang constant monitoring. Hindi nyo lang papabayaan na kung ano yung ginagawa sa Congress. Marami pong iba na mga groups, talaga pong na at least na-queue namin yung mga tao na gumagawa doon. Hindi lang naman kami. Minsan, if meron siyang provision on appropriations, padadaanin pa namin yan sa Committee on Appropriations. Kung meron provision on taxes, na incentives, padadaanin pa po namin yan sa Ways and Means other than my committee. So ganyan po, marami pong pinagdadaanan. Kaya mabuti rin po yung nakakalampag kami. Tip number 5, have an open channel with the Secretariat and ensure availability at all times. Yan po ang sinasabi ko. Always be available. So, minsan po, kailangan yung author, mga ganyan, nandiyan po kayo. And ito po, number 6 pointer is anticipating opposing views. So, whenever you post a piece of legislation, dapat po in-anticipate nyo rin po yung mga opposing views. Now, if kung anticipate yan, at least prepared kayo sa answer nyo, sa stand nyo. Kung talagang very strict kayo sa stand nyo, this is our stand. We have prepared for that, this is our answer. So that's it. So, importante po yan. Pero po, pagka hindi po talaga, wala pong yung kabila and kayo ay hindi magkatagpo. Ganyan po nangyari sa sustainable forest noong araw. Yung environmentalist versus the practitioners, the foresters, the business sector, kasama yan. Hindi po sila mag-agree. Sa definition pa lang ng forest, wala na, patay na, stalemate na. Sa definition ng watershed, gusto ng environmentalist, watershed continuum. Sabi ng mga hindi na kailangan watershed continuum. Watershed lang. Mga ganon. Ang dami. Ano lang yan, example lang. Pero sa SFM bill mismo, napakaraming provisions na talagang magkakaiba. So, ano po ang ginawa ng ganyan po? Kaya nung araw, hindi po magtugma, yung tumagal, hindi po approve yung sustainable forest management. May nagtanong po kanina, bakit? Kasi po nung araw ganoon. Nandito sila, panahon pa nila, sila Rene de Rueda, sila sa PAUB director, sila Attorney Polisco, sila Flor Tesoro, sila Dr. sa Forestry, sa Bonita, versus Haribon. Wala po nangyari. Pareho silang so stalemate. Mga ganon. Kasi they insist on their version while the other side insists on their version. So, yung kabilang side na to, sasabihan nila yung congressman, senator, ito po yung sa atin. My last tip is be prepared with other options and compromise. Yan po. Yung lesson po kasi na pagka hindi po tayo nag-give in, pag masyado tayong nag-stick dun sa hindi po natin ma-realize yung ating objective. Okay? So, ano pong ginawa ni Natutuwa ako dun sa ginawa ni President ng Society Filipino Foresters, itong Valdez. Nag-convene na siya ng technical working group among the stakeholders. So, siya po nag-initiate siya, nag-convene, in-invite na po lahat niya. Civil society, academe, DNR, agencies, LGUs, ganyan. Based on consensus. So, hindi para nung final po yung bill, hindi na po nag-away-away yung mga environmentalists versus the practitioners. Wala na po dahil napag-agreehan na nila. Maganda po yung ginawa ni Tom Valdez niyon. And I'm glad na yung Senate ito. And hindi ko po alam kung sino po yung senator na author ng bill na to eh. Anyway, mamaya po malaman natin. So, ayun po. I hope yung oras ko po ay medyo exceed na. And marami pa po tayong mga pag-uusapan tungkol dyan. But most important po, dito sa presentation ko, ay po yung last portion po, yung tips and pointers for the advocates. And isa pa pala, if you want to really succeed dun sa goal nyo, dun sa mga advocacies nyo, you should not only nurture, isama nyo, i-baby nyo hanggang sa matupad. Kasi po yung iba, nakikita ko parang after mga 2 years, 3 years, o kaya wala nang pondo yung programa nila, iiwan na lang, tatahimik na lang, wala nang pondo yung project, mga ganon. Pero if you really want to succeed, ano po, kay may pondo kay wala, dapat po tinututukan niyo. Yung po napansin ko, marami po ako napansin na ganyan. Lalo na yung mga bills na based on projects na dependent on budget. Nako, medyo alanganin po ako diyan. Minsan po hindi po natututukan till the end. Kaya yun po importante. You should not only communicate your policy advocacies, but you should nurture it, alagaan niyo po till the end. Sustain it. Maraming salamat po. Yun lang po.
Po yung sinabi nyo, sir, not only communicate or yung traditional way or definition of communicating the policy advocacies, but all to our policy researchers here, our science communicators, and our stakeholders in inyo pong presentation. So thank you very much, Sir Terso. And so let us get to know our second presenter. Our next presenter is a supervising forest management specialist in the Forest Management Bureau and section chief of the Environmental Forestry section of the Forest Resources Conservation Division of the same bureau. Previous to this, he worked as the head technical staff of the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Climate Change and Biodiversity Management Bureau, as well as for the staff bureaus. He obtained his BS degree in forestry at the UPLB. Let us all welcome and give a virtual round of applause to Forester Ray Tomas Kabigting.
Hi, good morning. Ay, good afternoon pala. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay ako?
Yes po.
Okay, yan. Good afternoon and good afternoon to our viewers. I'll just share my slide. Also, good afternoon to FDC, especially kay Doc Presi. Good afternoon po. And good afternoon din dun sa akin dalawang um, kasama ngayon na nagto-talk. Especially kay Sir Raul. Terso. Si Sir Raul yan, ano yan, isa yan sa mga mentors ko dito sa policy. Kasi batang-bata pa lang ako. Sa kanya ako natuto dito pagdating sa legislative process. So, madalas kayo magkasama sa house. Kasi po sa FMB po ako nagtatrabaho sa Forest Management Bureau. And isa po sa mga trabaho ko noon ay umattend sa mga committee hearings and TWG meetings on forestry bills. Actually, environmental bills in general. So, good afternoon once again, and I'm Tom Kabigting po ng Forest Management Bureau. And I'm gonna siguro share na lang my experiences on policy advocacies and communicating our advocacy. So, before I start, I'd like to share din na nung nasa UP po ako, ang aking course ay BS Forestry. So, ang aking specialization at that time, ang major ko was Social Forestry and Forest Governance. Kasi po, talagang nasa pagsusulat yung aking gustong gawin. So kaya po I decided to enter the government service because I thought that there's no other way for me to practice my advocacy, policy making kung hindi po pasok sa gobyerno. Kasi dito, ang Forest Management Bureau po, policy arm ng piniling landas kasi napapractice ko po at napagbuti ko pa, actually na-improve ko pa ang aking advocacy and skill set nung ako po ay pumasok sa government. And malaking bagay din po at malaking pasasalamat ko din sa Forest Management Bureau for trusting me with a lot of hands-on work when it comes to policy making and policy advocating. So, yan. So, communicating policy advocacies. This is, most of the people would see this as a very boring, as a very boring job. Ang lobbying, kung tawagin, or communicating policy advocacies. But actually, this is very fruitful. This is very fulfilling din pag naitawid mo yung polisiya mo na gustong maipasa. So, laging may sense of accomplishment ako sa sarili ko kapag natatapos or nagiging full circle yung policy na ina-advocate mo at dine-develop mo because you know that it might help someone that is in dire need of guidance. So, and dapat din, kapag nasa policy at kapag nasa larangan po kayo ng policy making, dapat may balance ka of being idealistic and being realistic at the same time. Kasi mamaya makikita natin, kailangan kapag so what is your arsenal? Ano yung dapat tools mo or ano yung dapat yung kargada mo kapag gusto mo maging, you need not be a lawyer, okay? But you should have an understanding of the laws and the policies that are that you need to know. For example, sa Forest Management Bureau, hindi pwedeng nasa policy making ka or policy advocate ka or policy personnel ka ng Forest Management Bureau tapos hindi mo alam yung buong PD 705 or yung Revised Forestry Code of the Philippines. Mortal sin yun kapag gano'n. Kailangan the basics. For example, nasa Community-Based Forest Management Division ka, dun po ako nagsimula before. Sa Community-Based Forest Management Division, dapat ako, as a personnel ng CBFN, dapat memorize ko by inalam ko rin at inaral ko rin yung policy ng corporate forestry. Kasi pag nagtatrabaho po kayo sa policy making or policy advocacy, there's no other weapon that you can use other than the policy itself. So, dapat you have a good understanding because when you have a good understanding of the law and of the policy, kaya mo siya ma-manipulate in a way na magagamit mo siya to your advantage. And you need that pagdating mo sa office nila, pagdating mo sa plenary, pagdating mo sa committee meetings, pagdating mo sa committee hearings, pagdating mo sa TWG meetings, pag nakita mo na si Sir Raul at yung kanyang Committee on Environment, dapat ready ka. You're on your toes lagi. Wala ka ng time para mag-review ng notes mo. Pag may binato sa'yo, dapat masagot mo. Especially ngayon, ang committee chair natin ay si Representative Barzaga, which is a very good lawyer. You really have to know how to answer, because one wrong answer and one misstep might lead to the rejection of your policy recommendation or or whatever you're advocating for. So law, and the second one is science. So forestry is above all a science. You need to be able to communicate your science, whatever it is that you're doing, in a very fluent manner, in a very articulate manner. Because, again, just like policy and law, you cannot defend something that you do not know about. So, hand in hand yan. Kapag po nasa House of Representatives tayo mo doon, ang purpose mo doon is to share the technical side, the technicality of the bill or of the pending policy issuance. That is your role as a member of the Forest Management Bureau, not to lecture them on the constitutionality or the validity of be valid and enforceable. So, malaki ang maitutulong po sa inyo kung you update yourselves every now and then with the science that whatever you are advocating for. Ako, in my case, forestry. So, constant dapat ang updating tan. And you should be a sponge. You should be humble enough to admit that you have to learn every day. Learning doesn't stop. You would have it has to be a continuous process. And then the third one is network. So, importante itong network kasi I have established very good working relationships with Sir Raul. Tinatawagan namin ng isa't isa. I remember one session, third reading na nung SFM bill. So, I had to go to the meeting. Fortunately or unfortunately, the provision in questions were the tax incentives proposed in the bill. And fortunately and unfortunately also, ang katunggali ko nun ay the director from the Bureau of Internal Revenue and an official from the Department of Finance. So nung ine-explain nila yung side nila, so nandun yung BIR and DOF. So nung ine-explain nila yung side nila dun sa committee chair, at that time it was Congressman Arnel. Siyempre, laban mo doon, di ba? BIR yun, saka DOF. So siyempre, but then the bill was recommended for third reading. And then tinawagan ko si Sir Raul. Sabi ko, Sir, nababan, masyado kang matigas pagdating sa ganyan. Alam mo naman yung pagkukulang. So, you have to accept it. So, ganun yung working relationship namin ni Sir Raul. We call each other, we talk, I ask him for help, for advice pagdating sa trabaho. And that's a good network kasi secretary siya. Relationship din because of the policy research that they do. So I need their results for my policy drafting naman, recommendation. Doc Presi has been a very good mentor of mine, a very good friend also. Nakita ko ni Doc Presi, nagsisimula pa lang ako, and up until now, yun yung networks that you don't want to lose. Those are the bridges that you don't want to burn also. And well, if you are capable enough or if you have the guts to do it, build networks also with the legislators themselves. So madami na tayo naging kaibigan na legislators because kailangan mo ng champion. Sinasabi nga ni Sir Raul kanina, mamaya pag-uusapan natin. The most important thing that you need to have is a champion in the House or in the Senate. You cannot survive without one. At least one. So, yun. Kaya network is very valuable. kailangan lahat ng chief of staff kilala mo, kailangan lahat ng technical staff nila kilala mo. Pag pinatawag ka, dapat ready ka, articulate ka, and you are there to share information, not to dictate. Always remember that also. You are there to share, to encourage them, to support you, not to make them do something. It's more of convincing rather than controlling the legislator. Okay. So what are the challenges that I've faced and continue facing until now? Number one, priority. So um, you might ask why we get all these typhoons, we get all these earthquakes, we get all these things with our environment, and yet we cannot amend or we cannot enhance our revised forestry code, our environmental impact assessment system. Pareho pong presidential decree pa rin yan. Pero ang corporation code na nauna pa tama kasi PD 68 yun, PD 69. So nauna pa sa PD 705 at PD 1559 na-amend na, kaka-amend lang. And the tax code has been amended multiple times. Other laws can be amended. Banking laws is continuously being focused sa banking laws, papalit-palit. But then again, the Sustainable Forest Management Act, well, hindi pa rin naman masisisi. There are priorities of our legislators and our lawmakers. That's the reason why we're here. Tayo yung may burden of making them feel or making them realize that we are a priority, that the environment is a priority, and it cannot be given the ample or the needed protection that it needs without a very up-to-date legislation and legal environment. So mahirap i-implement ang isang batas designed in 1975 sa 2021 with all the nuances of the age that we have now. Kaya hindi tayo dapat titigil. Until mapunta tayo sa top ng listahan, doon lang tayo dapat magpahinga. Pero hanggat hindi pa yun, dapat tuloy-tuloy natin siya ina-advocate for it to become a priority. Next is the content. So, ito yung madalas problema natin. Hindi to exclusive sa forestry. Sa lahat, this applies. When you write something, when you write a policy down, and when you write anything down for other people's consumption, if you write down a policy or a bill on forestry, always remember or keep in mind that the person who's going to read it, the chair of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, is not a forester. So it should be in the simplest form possible without sacrificing the quality of the document. Dapat po madaling intindihin. Hindi po sila yung mag-a-adjust to follow, and that because of following this will be the benefits. If they don't get that, they won't believe us. They won't trust us with the document. Hindi nila yan ipaprioritize. So content is very important. Kahit sa amin, sa loob ng FMB po, kanina lang, galing ako ng Policy Review Committee, handling of the law, the policy, and of the science, because that is what you use to articulate your ideas and your thoughts and be able to, impress among people your advocacy or your belief and what you want to happen. And the third one is the champion. So katulad nga po na nabanggit kanina Sir Raul, hindi tayo talaga magsusurvive as advocates kung wala tayong champions. So, kailangan po natin yan. You have to understand the nuances of our legislative system. What you're saying is good enough for them and is worth their trust and their defense. Kasi pagdating po kasi sa plenary or sa readings, hindi ikaw yung magbabasa sa floor eh. Sila eh. It would be their own time. So you have to make them believe that they can own this. And that's very important. So na dun sa mga people who's starting out on policy making or policy advocacy, especially nakita ko po kanina may mga kasamahan ako dito sa DNR na nanonood. Huwag kayo matatakot. Hindi nyo yan makukuha the first time. Hindi, yung first draft ninyo, ng policy ninyo, hindi yan papasa the first time. Ganun talaga. Marami akong mga policies na hindi nakapasa, hindi nakalusot. It's part of the job. It's part of the industry that we went into. And then you'll hit that sweet spot. Tapos, makakapagpapasa ka and then the feeling is very pag in-implement na yung policy na naipasa ninyo, na naipapasa ninyo, may magkakaproblema yun. Dynamic yan eh. So magkakaproblema yun. May mali kang makikita, papalitan mo na naman siya ulit. Okay. So you don't cast it in stone. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of our job. That's the beauty of our career. Is we can change through our policy advocacy and policy recommendations. And that's something that you don't have to be afraid of. So keep doing what you're doing. Bear in mind lang yung mga challenges natin and thank you for inviting me and good afternoon po.
Wow, thank you po, Forester Tom, Kabigting, for that clear presentation and sharing your experiences also in your field. Ang takeaway ko po parang kailangan po talaga in policy work, we have grit. We have to be literally advocates po. Ayan, so parang halo po siya ng idealism and kailangan idealistic ka, kailangan realistic ka din. Wow. Dami ko pong natutunan, sir. Ang ganda rin po na parang nakita ko din po, kailangan parang sa policy work, you have to be the complete package. You have to be knowledgeable about the law. You have to be knowledgeable about the policy and then the science. Yes, kailangan po natin maging isang complete package. And we see that in Sir Tom po, no? In Sir Tom's presentation in his work. So congrats po. Ayan, so second presenter pa lang po natin ito. Wag na wag po kayong aalis dahil meron pa po tayong third presenter and he will be giving us a different perspective as he is from a different field. Alam ko po most of us are in the forestry sector, but he will be giving us a perspective from the health sector. This third speaker, he is currently the Health Education and Promotion Officer at the Health Promotion Bureau of the department. Use DOH campaigns such as the department's COVID-19 response, COVID-19 vaccine demand generation, and universal health care. Prior to joining DOH, he was a Program and Communications Officer at the Mekong Institute, an international organization based in advanced study of sustainability in Tokyo, Japan. So ayan po, please welcome Mr. Paoloregel Samonte.
15, no? Pareho tayo, Michiko.
Yes. So thank you so much, Kuya Pao. Kuya Pao ang tawag ko kay sir.
So happy to be here. Sige. So while we're okay, yan. Thank you, Sir Raymond. So I just like to manifest first and foremost, no, that I'm very impressed by the earlier presentations that we saw, and I think it's very insightful because as Michiko mentioned, I'm not really from the policy field. I'm really more of a communications person. So it's really very interesting for me to learn more about policy and advocacies. And so in relation to that, I'd just like to say also early on that I'll be approaching our topic this afternoon a little bit differently because yun nga, yung background ko po is really on communications, and that's what my presentation would be all about. So it's all about the DOH COVID-19 campaigns, Be the Solution Plus and Res Bakuna, and how we communicate the policies surrounding these campaigns to the general public, and so they would be able to contribute to our success in health communication. So yun po. If we can just go to the next one. So a little bit of explainer lang kung ano yung ginagawa po namin sa Bureau. And then the next point would be, so we understand our COVID campaign. And then I will also go through some of our challenges in policy communication. And then some advice siguro on what our roles as the general public, as stakeholders would be in terms of supporting our campaigns. So, okay, next slide po. So first of all, a little bit about the Health Promotion Bureau of the Department of Health. So yung general functions niya is to really develop directions, policies, standards, and guidelines and pertaining to health promotion. And then also provide policy advice to our partner agencies and provide technical is everyone is healthy. And parang hindi na tayo mag-aantay na magkasakit para i-maintain natin yung magandang lifestyle, magandang health. And then because we...
What? Okay. Aside from doon sa committee level deliberation, yon. Doon nila pag nakita nilang mas malawak na kasi yun, ano, hindi lang committee members and the whole members of the house. Pag nakita nila na gusto nila yung bill, then pwede pa rin silang mag-manifest ng kanilang intention for co-authorship sa bill. So, sa filing ng bill, sa committee level, and dun sa author.
Okay. Thank you po, Mr. Raul, for that answer. Ngayon po, jumping back to Sir Tom po ulit. This is a question from Sautida ng Bcamp Project, ACB. Ayan. So, their question is how to convince local people who not involved in process of policy making decision to follow and effectively implement the policies. Thank you.
First of all, you have to craft a policy. That's not very difficult to understand. Dapat yan ay tinuturo para masundan nila yung sinulat mo. Ipakita mo sa kanila that it's not something that is remote to their benefits. Is that when we introduce, may nakita akong Philippine Eagle, may nakita akong ganito, may nakita akong ganyan. Tapos babalik sila sa opisina nila, report sila, and then ipa-file nila. Ngayon, nag-introduce tayo ng app na pwede nila i-install sa kanilang phone. Tapos sa phone nila, gamit yung camera na yung acceptance nitong policy na to, policy change na to, very low. Kasi akala nila, dagdag trabaho. Parang naglilista na nga kami sa your policy recommendation. Sinasabi namin sa kanila, hindi na po kayo gagamit ng papel. Ang gagamitin na lang po ninyo, cellphone. Paano yan kapag walang signal, pag walang internet, wala akong ganyan. Pwede po ito offline. Yung mga ganun, you have to explain to them in a way that you are encouraging them or making them believe you. Hindi mo ini-impose. Kasi pag ini-impose mo na yan sa kanila, magiging hesitant sila. So, communication is very crucial in policy advocacy and policies para mas maintindihan at mas mag-grasp ng grassroots natin. Hindi lang tayo yung nakakaintindi. So, thank you.
Right. Ayan. Thank you po. Now, we have Sir Paolo naman, may question po kayo from Celso PDS, and I think marami din pong nagtatanong from the reps, from the technical staff po dito sa CFNR. They ask how effective the approaches your office is doing to remedy the increasing trend of COVID-19 positives. Have you done any impact assessment of your strategies? So, ayan po yung tanong.
Yeah, thank you po for that question. Thank you, Michiko. And I think it's a very difficult question to answer simply because ang hirap talaga mag-assess ng effectiveness for a national campaign this big. I think our biggest intervention working, etc. But again, from our side naman, sa communications lang, and in terms of campaign, we have various measures that we use to assess yung effectiveness ng PIDA Solution Plus. So that would be sa regional level, meron silang sariling PIDA Solution Plus na campaign also. We also do weekly social listening na tinitignan natin kung ano yung mga lumalabas sa balita, ano yung sinasabi ng mga tao sa comment section, ng mga posts sa Facebook, and then we assess, tinitignan natin ano ba yung kailangan nila, whether or not the messages are resonating to them. So yun, those are very different measures that we all combine together para masabi natin na yes, the intervention is working. Siguro in addition to that, I just want to add na dito rin pumapasok yung point ko kanina na communication really can only take us so far. Because we always, I think, tease. So, kaya yun, yung parang pagbibigay natin ng parang advice na, uy, mag-mask ka, maghugas ka ng kamay, that should also be coupled with policies and interventions coming from the intervention na yun ay nagpapababa or effective in managing the current rise of cases.
Ayan. Thank you po. Thank you, Paolo. And now, let's go back to Sir Raul. This is a question from Danica Domingo again. This is a parang follow-up question po ito. Sabi niya po, could advocate...
Kasi nga, ano na yan kumbaga, role na, ball game na ng mga sponsors yan, ng mga congressman and senators. Basta nasa plenary ka na, sila na may say. Okay? The advocacy groups, pwede sila nandun to as backstop support. And usually ginagawa nila before the session, ang strategy nila minsan pupunta sa office ng congressman or senator. Tapos doon mag-elaborate pa sila, ganyan, mag-explain further, no, before humarap yung congressman or senator sa floor. Ganon. But definitely, pagdating sa floor, wala. Kahit kami, kahit ako, hindi. Only the congressmen and senators can participate.
That is all po. Dino-double check ko po kung meron pa po tayong ano. Ayan, may iba po kasi na may iba po kasing questions na I guess na na-address naman na po from the answers during the open forum. Ayan, so if you really want to still ask your questions, maybe just comment your questions po to the participants. Maybe you can just comment your questions po dun sa comment section ng ating FB live stream. So doon po, pwede po tayong mag-interact. Let's prolong this conversation po. Pwede po tayong mag-interact and we will do our best to share your questions to our speakers, or maybe the staff of the FDC can also answer your questions po. Ayan, so last question po to all of you. So, ito po siya. For all of the speakers, kindly comment to the statement that Filipinos are very good at crafting laws, policies, advocacies, but are very weak in implementing them. Ayan po. So, pwede po siguro unang sumagot ay si Sir Tom. What can you say po dun sa statement daw po na ito?
Pagdating sa statement na yan, yun nga yung sinasabi ko kanina. Dapat kapag policy maker ka, idealistic ka, at the same time, realistic ka din. During my spirited yan, hindi po yan masasagot ng polisiya. Kahit po anong isulat ninyong policy, mangyayari po yan. So may mga ganon. You need to know what to address using policies, and you need to know what to address using other tools. kapag hindi na i-implement yung polisiya mo, ibig sabihin hindi siya realistic or hindi siya accepted. May kulang somewhere in between. And you have to address that. You don't have to stop and just accept that, magaling magsulat pero hindi mapapatupad. Kasi that's not a good measure. Wala tayo sa essay writing contest dito. Minamanage natin ay bansa. Okay, hindi opisina, hindi hindi negosyo. Ang minamanage natin ay bansa, mga tao. At in our case sa DNR, likas yaman ang ating minamanage. So I think it should be on the policymakers burden na dapat yung sinusulat mo pa lang ay alam mo na ganito mo siya i-implement. Kaya ang tip ko sa mga kasamahan ko dito, policy makers, ang unang-una kong ginagawa lagi is framework. Tapos, pag gumawa ka ng framework, step back ka, tingnan mo kung ikaw ang susunod sa framework mo, magagawa mo ba yun? Yan. Kapag hindi, kung ikaw na yan, policy maker, hindi mo magagawa yun, wag mo na ituloy. May problema ka, ipalitan mo. Siguro huli kong point, lagi nating iisipin sa policy making. Ito, sinulat ko po ito kasi kaya ko po itong gawin. Dapat po ang mindset natin, sinulat ko to, magagawa po ninyo to. Sinulat ko po ito, maiintindihan po ninyo ito. Dapat ganon. So, may nabanggit kanina si Paolo, dapat may empathy ka. So, you are not on your own. You are not the leader of the band. Okay? You are a member. So, para sa ibang tao yung ginagawa mo. And I think that sums up, that is a good...
Po ay punta po tayo kay Paolo. Sir Pao, do you have a comment on that statement? Gusto niyo po ba na banggitin ko po ulit or okay na po?
No, it's okay. Yeah, I heard the question. From my very limited knowledge of policy, no, and probably with they know what to communicate essentially. Magaling tayo magsulat. And in relation to that, magaling din daw ang mga Pilipinong sumunod. Sabi nila, I think parang kinompare nila through Google Maps, yung parang map ng mundo during nung time na nagkasabay-sabay makda ng tao sa kalsada na walang lumalabas. Mas masawa yung ibang bansa sa atin. So, masunurin daw tayo. So, magaling tayo gumawa ng batas, magaling sumunod yung mga Pilipino. Somewhere in the middle, sa implementation side, I think, baka doon yung lacking. And I would say, I don't have very exhaustive knowledge on implementing policies. Pero ang observation ko is parang there are a lot of systemic problems that we have right now and patupad yung mga batas and for people also to follow. So I guess that's my 2 cents again from my very limited perspective also.
Thank you, Sir Pao. And now punta po tayo kay Sir Raul. Can you comment po dun sa statement po na ito? Sir Raul, you are naka-mute po kayo.
Okay. For me, it's a two-way perspective. No law or policy is 100% perfect. Okay? That's why, siguro, pagdating sa implementation, medyo nagkakaroon ng difficulties. Like, for example, if the law is too old, like the PD 705, no? 1975, it's almost 45 years, no? But kailangan na talagang i-revise. In the same way na minsan naman sa implementation naman nagkakaroon ng problema. And ewan ko bakit ganon. Maraming factors, okay? Marami mga local leaders, no, local executives, politicians, business sector. Marami po. Kaya ang sagot naman ng legislation dyan is ginagawa nila, come up with an inquiry or investigation in aid of legislation. No? Paano pa natin mapapabuti? Dahil yan ang ginagawa nila, hihigpitan ba natin? Ganyan, o magdadagdag tayo ng mga guidelines, mga safeguards, or pagka nahihirapan ng implementors, kailangan ba natin baguhin yung ibang provisions ng law? Ganyan. I don't really, or in the way they interpret and implement the law. Pero kaya nga meron kaya nga meron review palagi ng law No, say in 7 years, 5 years, 10 years, meron mga sa ibang laws, meron ganyan, automatic review. Maybe hindi na natutupad yung objective ng bill na yun. Kaya dapat i-revisa. Yun lang po. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you po, sir. Ayan, thank you po, speakers, for answering the questions so patiently. Ayan po, dahil napakadami po, ano? Ayan, nakailang rounds din po tayo ng question and answer. Although there are still more, but katulad po ng sinabi ko, let's continue this conversation on Facebook na lamang po. Ayan. We can, unfortunately po tayo sa awarding of certificates po. Ayan. So, please screen share the certificates. I'll just read the citations po. The Forestry Development Center of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños awards the certificate to Mr. Raul Advocacies. Presented during the Forest Policy ETalks FDC webinar series of 2021, issued on 20th of April 2021, organized by the FDC with support of the UPLB Information Technology Center via Zoom webinar. Signed, Marlo D. Mendoza, Dean of CFNR, and Priscila C. Dolom, Director of FDC. Ayan, thank you so much po, and let us all give a warm virtual round of applause po sa ating mga speakers. Ayan, so now to give her response and closing remarks, here is the Director of the Forestry Development Center, Dr. Priscila C. Dolom.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the second of the FDC's webinar series 2021, Forest Policy ETalks, with the theme Communicating Policy Advocacies to the Public and Policymakers. Our three speakers or experts shared with us their practices and experiences and how they communicate policy advocacies in their own fields. And this was further enhanced or elaborated by the active participation of our participants through their question center, or FDC is doing, in terms of communicating policy advocacies to the public and policymakers. What we are doing. Among the advocacies of the center are sustainable forest management for the last 30 years, promotion of non-timber forest products, watershed management, national forest certification, and other SFN initiatives. The FDC represents the Philippines in international policy consultations and reports updates to the country mainly on global initiatives on forest policies. The FDC has done remarkable work in terms of communicating policy advocacies. In fact, we have a unit that focuses solely on advocacy activities. It is called the Forest Policy Advocacy Policy Unit, which is headed by Ms. Cynthia Kasi. The role of FDC as a mediator. We have organized policy consultations, roundtable discussions, where we gather inputs from our stakeholders, such as non-governmental organizations, local government units, governmental agencies, academe, CSOs, people's organizations, indigenous people's organizations, private sector, international organizations, holistic policy recommendations. In these consultations, the values of the mediator must be adopted by the center. meaning what we hope to achieve or apply is more important than what we say or how we say it. The role of FDC as a policy research arm. As the policy research arm in the academe, the Forestry Development Center conducts policy research, projects, and studies. We also hold or facilitate policy and technical forum, gaya po nitong ating Forest Policy ETalks, where scientists and experts share research studies related to the theme. Stakeholders are also invited as resource speakers or reactors to the environment and natural resources sector and to generate more studies and research recommendations. Aside from policy fora and webinars, the FDC also produces publications such as policy brief, proceedings, and other information, education, and communication materials to increase awareness among the public and policy makers. At present, the Forestry Development Center at FDC, with our limited resources, are trying our best to work as what is mandated to us, which is to conduct policy research and formulate and advocate policies. The FDC hopes to facilitate a stronger collaborations and linkages among stakeholders, especially policymakers, in influencing their policy decisions. As we are holding this webinar, the FDC's Forest Policy ETalks on communicating policy advocacies, we hope that we were able to share with you the experiences of our policy experts in their fields. May their insights about communicating policy advocacies to policymakers and the solutions, practices, and how to strengthen relationship of the science community, stakeholders, and policy advocates, policymakers, aid you in your future and of ongoing activities. On behalf of the Policy Advocacies, Forester Ray Tomas Kabigting of the Forest Management Bureau, DNR, Mr. Raul Terso of the House of Representatives, Mr. Paoloregel Samonte of the Department of Health, and of course, to our participants from the various sectors, the academe, the UPLB reps and faculty members, PPEN members, non-governmental agencies, the local government units, private institutions, non-governmental organizations or the civil society organizations, the international organization, funding agency who provides technical and financial assistance in the management of our natural resources, the people's organizations or the indigenous people's organizations, and other stakeholders. Thank you very much for. Our sincerest thanks to our partners, the UPLB ITC, which is headed by their director, Dr. Rosano Manyaol, and Maki Agsunod and Mr. Ray Hecalao. Thank you, Benens, for. And lastly, to the FDC staff, the organizer of this webinar. Thank you very much for your hard work and commitment in pursuing this forest policy ethos. Muli po, maraming pong salamat sa inyong lahat and stay safe always. Thank you very much. Sana po patuloy niyong suportahan ang Forest Policy ETalks ng Forestry Development Center. Thank you po.
Thank you po. Thank you po, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am Dolom, and thank you to all the participants for coming to the Forest Policy ETalks FDC webinar series of 2021. Here is the QR code and link to the post-evaluation form. Don't forget to fill this up and submit within 7 days. Shortly after po, we will give you the certificates, your e-certificates. The presentations of the speakers will be given upon request po. All the instruction will be provided for you once you have submitted your post-evaluation form. Okay, so ayan po. Also, please like and follow our Facebook page for announcement of our next webinar para po kayo ay updated. Again, this is Michiko Buot, your host for today. Ingat po tayong lahat. Ayan. Thank you po sa ating mga speakers. Sobrang salamat po talaga sa inyong suporta, sa inyong knowledge, sa inyong public service.